Hello, this is Paul Nelson with Western Sport Floors, Wyoming Wood Floors, coming to you today from Clinton, Montana. Today we have a fantastic discussion about dead spots in gymnasium floors. Probably nothing bothers athletic directors, coaches, and players more than dead spots in gymnasium floors. And so we are going to bring in the country's premier expert on sport surfaces, Dr. Paul Elliott, ASET Services. And Dr. Elliott is going to talk about dead spots in gymnasium floors. Here we go. All right, so I have with me joining Dr. Paul Elliott with ASET Services. Dr. Elliott, can you tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do for our industry?
So I'm Paul Elliott. I'm from ASET Services. We provide third-party testing and services. We test products in the lab. We test products in the field. We test hardwood floors. We test running tracks, playgrounds, basketball equipment, basketball rims, basically to ensure that products comply with relevant standards.
So we're going to talk about dead spots in a gymnasium floor setting, dead spots where the primary use of this facility is basketball. So in dribbling a basketball, you have a dead spot. You wrote a white paper on this issue. I just, thinking about it, I find this paper absolutely genius. You listed 3 separate inputs to the athlete, and can you go through them briefly?
What we found was when we did a ball rebound test only, our results didn't necessarily agree with what people thought were dead spots. As you walk on the floor, as you pay attention to what's going on, at each point, you really have a user has 3 inputs that they see, hear, and feel. 1 is the rebound height. 2 is the sound that the floor makes during the impact. And 3 is the vibrations that you feel up from the floor from the feet. My personal theory is that most people don't think about the 3 inputs. They take those 3 inputs and your brain says the rebound height is low, when it may be the sound is different or the vibration is different, and the rebound height really isn't that much different.
And so you do testing on gymnasium floors, correct?
Yes.
Among your surfaces. So you've certainly had folks that have been unhappy with their floor or thought they had dead spots. And can you kind of walk through what happens when somebody calls you to test a floor that has dead spots?
The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to explain to them that not all of the tests, all of the metrics that we can use, measuring dead spots is and finding dead spots is relatively uncommon. So there's a decent chance we'll come back and say there aren't dead spots. That way we haven't taken someone's money on false hope that we're going to find dead spots. Once we go to a job site, we'll ask the facility to do this, which is our preference, or we will do it. Basically, we're going to ask them to find and locate 5 to 10 spots that they consider ideal, and we're going to ask them to locate all the dead spots that they have. Basically, then we test spots that we think or they think have high rebound. We test spots that they think have low rebound, and we look at the difference between high spots and low spots. That's what we use in our internal standard that we use to define whether or not there's a dead spot.
So now you head out, you set up your equipment, and what has been your experience in testing, I assume, dozens of floors that ostensibly had dead spots in them?
Half to 2/3 of the time, we don't have rebound heights that support saying there are dead spots. So half the time, at least, when someone complains of dead spots, when we measure them according to the standards we have, we don't find that there are dead spots. In our standard, we define a difference in rebound from the highest point to the lowest spot of 7 to 9% difference. Those spots we classify as marginally dead. Out of that, say 50% that has dead spots, 95% of those spots are going to be marginally dead. We define any point that has more than 10% lower rebound than the best spots on the floor. We define that as being significantly dead. Those are extremely rare. Fewer than probably 2% of the points that we test would hit that category.
And by significant dead spot, this is something that could truly impact the playability of that surface.
Yes.
Okay. So it's really the significant dead spots that you're recommending to the customers that they attempt to make some repair on.
There are some cosmetic issues and there are some structural issues that are brought about by the various repairs that occur. So you have to decide, is what I'm going to do to alter my floor worth it for the performance gain I'm going to get? And think about this too. The standard is plus or minus 3%. You're talking about a 1, 2, or 3% gain in rebound that you're probably going to get. Client has to decide if it's worth it for that repair.
Can you talk just briefly about what you would consider a repair for dead spots?
Personally, seen two solutions used with regard to dead spots. They both have pluses and minuses. The first one really works best on an older floor, a new floor that's a hard design, or an old floor that's 20 or 30 years old where you don't really know what performance is. It's probably the most common. That's where you drill a small hole, 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch hole in the maple. You put in an expanded urethane foam like we'd use around a window or door jamb. That expands, that fills up the void. That makes the floor nice and hard. It no longer has a dead spot. But you now have a hard spot. So if your floor is already hard and non-uniform, it doesn't really matter. But you create a non-uniformity in the floor by doing that. The second solution that we've seen also used is if you have what we call a bioresilient floor. And a bioresilient floor would say shock absorption around 50%. Vertical deformations 2 millimeters or more. If you have one of those floors, then the most common fix for those that we've seen are either a re-anchoring of an anchored floor or a spot anchoring at isolated locations of a floating floor. And that's where you're going to have to drill a larger hole in the floor. You're talking about at least a 1-inch diameter hole. You're probably going to have to remove part of the board and replace it. It's a lot more work, it's a lot more expensive, and it's a lot harder to hide at the end of the day.
Gotcha.
And frankly, the third solution that we've seen make kind of everybody happy has nothing to do with dead spots. And the contractor says, I'll screen and recoat your floor next year for nothing. And they say, well, I got something out of it and I'm good.
I think what you've done with your white paper, and the reason that I wanted to have this visit with you, is I thought you did an exceptional job of talking about those sensory inputs to the athlete. And let's understand that there definitely are floors where there's different sounds in different areas. And there's definitely floors that have a different vibrational feel coming into your feet from area to area. But neither one of those necessarily correlate with rebound height. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and that white paper is one that was built off of one case study, but I went to the field years ago. We tested about 40 spots. We had 40 spots, and a client said, all of these spots are dead spots. We looked at rebound height, and it was a 50-50 toss-up as to whether the low rebound heights were dead spots or not. We looked at acoustical sound differences, which weren't scientifically taken, by the way, but They were what we could do at the time. And we had closer to a 70 to 75% agreement, where we had a group of floors that sounded one way and a group of floors that sounded the other way. And the one sound difference, which really sound more like a bass tone, is what people thought were dead spots about 75% of the time.
And I thought it was interesting, just to make sure that I heard it correctly, but maybe as low as 2% of what athletes are thinking are dead spots are actually what you're able to measure and classify as a dead spot. Is that accurate?
I would say it's a severe dead spot, yeah. Like the severe dead spots that are 10% or more, that's pretty rare. That takes a problem with the floor. Either it probably wasn't installed well, or it was damaged during the construction. Somebody rolled something on it they shouldn't have, or whatever. But there are very few. 10% is an enormous difference on a gym floor, on a hardwood floor.
All right. Well, as always, Dr. Elliott, I appreciate you bringing some light to this issue. Any final thoughts you have for anybody that's frustrated with their floor related to dead spots?
If you think you have dead spot problems on your floor, the number one thing to do that I tell people is you need to look at your specification. If your floor is what I call a generic floor, many of those don't say anything about performance in the specification. So if you don't have something that outlines in some way, here's the performance of this system, there's really nothing, if we do the tests and find dead spots or don't, there's really nothing in that product specification saying you won't have them. And it really comes down to, in those cases, of, is a contractor going to work with you out of the goodness of their heart or to save their own reputation? Because without it being in the spec, you really don't have very much to enforce dead spots or enforce the lack of dead spots or get them repaired.
Is there an easy way that an owner, facility manager could do a little testing on their own?
The honest reality is it's pretty daggone hard. Let's just talk about the math. Now, you're talking about a rebound height that's roughly 1 meter. Each percent difference on rebound is only about a half or a quarter inch. It's really hard to eyeball that.
Right.
Number one thing I would tell an owner is go through and check your ball pressures, because the more pressure you have in the ball, the greater the difference will be. The deader the dead spots will be, and the liver the live spots will be. I know that's bad grammar, but that's the easiest way I can describe it. So if you have a coach or players who are going, hey, my floor is dead, I'm going to keep putting air in it, and all of a sudden you're running basketballs at 10, 11, 12 psi instead of 7 to 9, you'll exacerbate the problem. They'll be deader. So number one thing I would say is check your rebound pressures, keep them within the tolerance of the ball. That'll help to minimize actual dead spots. 2, if you think you have dead spots, call us. We'll take the time. We'll explain to you. We'll let you know 100% what we can tell you, what we can't tell you. And you can decide on your own whether you think it's worth it to have a field test done. We make sure everybody knows what the outcome is and what our limitations are as to what we can tell them before we go do a test.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Elliott, I appreciate you joining me today and bringing some light to this issue for us all.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Appreciate what you do for the industry, Paul.
Have a good day, Paul.
Well, thank you very much for watching. I know that video was a little bit long and it was quite technical. And one of the challenges of making a technical video is that it's not quite as entertaining as what we'd normally like to see our videos, but there was good information on that video. One of the things that I don't think we covered well enough that I'd like to cover right here at the end is the technological advances in gymnasium floors. I've got a couple of floors here, and there's others too, but this is the Bio-Channel Star from Robbins Sport Surfaces. And what we're looking at, this gray area here, that represents the concrete. But then Robbins has their 0G foam, There's a complete layer of plywood and the maple on top. What happens in a floor system like that is that it produces an extremely consistent ball bounce all the way across that floor. This is another floor system by Robbins. It's called their MVP floor system. Again, the gray represents the concrete, layer of plywood on the concrete, sandwiched a layer of the 0G shock pad, and then the maple on top of that. These high performance floors with the 0G shock pad almost completely eliminate any complaint of dead spot because they have such a consistent ball bounce all the way across the floor system. And if you have a floor that you're frustrated with, it's an older floor, you know, at some level it's like having an old car. You can put a new muffler on it, but it's still kind of a rattle trap. And so upgrading your floor system to a new high performance floor might be something that your organization should think about in the near future. For Western Sport Floors and Wyoming Wood Floors, this is Paul Nelson. You make it a great day.